Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Friday, February 6th, 2026 at 10:17 in the morning. So we're here, start taking some testimony. I think we're going to start with H733. We have David Hall from the Secretary of State's office. David, if you'd like to join us.
Sure. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. See you all again. David Hall, Director, Business Services Division, Secretary of State's Office.
Good to have you back in the seat again.
Glad to be here, as always.
So 733 is a regulation of franchise agreements. One thought that I've had, and why I've asked you, is we really don't know right now who's a franchise. We're not sure who the franchisors are, the franchisees are. I guess the first question is franchisors, if they're doing business in the state, are they required to register with the Secretary of State's office?
If they're doing business here, absolutely yes.
I guess doing business, does that means if they're only have franchisees in the state, is that still doing business in the state?
Sure. I mean, this seems like one of those questions that should just have like a really easy answer, and of course it doesn't. And that's because, quixotically, the statute doesn't say what it means to be doing business in a jurisdiction. In fact, it does the opposite, and it says just because you do these types of things might mean that you're doing business, but it might not. And then it's got a list of things that alone don't constitute doing business in the state. But it's not an affirmative. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's not advice that we give out to the world because it's legal advice. It triggers the duty to take some sort of action out in the world, and that's the kind of thing an attorney tells a client yes or no. I mean, generally we probably just want to nudge people to be registered. So the way it works we call it a foreign business. And that means not domiciled in Vermont. It means another state, another country. If you're a foreign entity, you've been formed in some other jurisdiction. So you legally exist in Massachusetts or wherever else, but you can go to the other states. You want to do business in those states and can do so with lawful authority. You would file for a certificate of good standing or not, excuse me, a certificate of authority. It can be called different things in different places. You'd give us your information, what your name is, what your address is, all the usual stuff. You would actually have to give us a certificate of good standing issued by your state's jurisdiction so that we would see that it matches up and that you do exist and you're in good standing there. Then we would come and approve that and let you do business here. So if you are doing business here, yes, you need to come to us and file as a foreign domiciled LLC, corporation, whatever, to have lawful authority to act in the state. And if you don't, there's enforcement available through the AG's office, including the loss of access to courts, penalties for every day that you're not signed up. So the requirement is there across the board. If you're transacting business in Vermont, you have to register with us. If you don't, you're not acting with lawful authority, and there are consequences. I was going to pull up the provision in case you're curious about what it means to do or not be doing business. Is that something you're interested in? This is exemplary, a good example under subchapter 8, foreign LLCs, section 4113, activities not constituting transacting business. I don't know if I want to see this on the screen.
Can you make David a photo? Thank you.
Did you join the meeting? Do you have the link or do you want us to invite you?
You know, the way that it's been working with everything going through, and I'm not sure if I ended up with the link or not. I apologize for the technical hiccup. I don't think I have it. Sorry.
Yes.
David.p.hall, HALL, at vermont.gov.
There's a comment.
At Yahoo.
It's.
Okay. Zooming in. So before I can, I'll say it works like this the language is pretty much the same across entity types, but remember that each type has its own framework. I'm gonna, that's all. Sounds off. Okay. All of my audio, I hope, is now off. And let's see. Where's the statute? It's amazing how quickly you forget how to use Zoom.
So you're a little out of practice.
It's terrible. The rest of government is all on Teams, and I just sort of.
The share button. And the ability to select either sharing your full desktop screen or the application possible.
Okay, well, all that just to bring you back to your own statutes and show you 11 VSA 4113. So, your prohibition: foreign LLC may not transact business in the state until it obtains a certificate of authority from the Secretary of State. Except as provided in C, doing business or transacting business shall include any act, power, or privilege exercised or enjoyed in the state by a foreign LLC. I guess that's your affirmative, but that doesn't really tell you much, And then C, this is where it gets interesting. Among others, following activities without more do not constitute transacting business for the purpose of determining whether they have to register with us. So maintaining, defending, or settling any proceeding. So, there's a court action or something like it. Holding meetings of members or managers, or carrying on other activity. So you come for your board meeting in Stowe, that doesn't make you doing business. Maintaining bank accounts, maintaining offices or agencies for the transfer, exchange, and registration of its own securities or trustees or depositories with respect to the securities. So selling through independent contractors. So
Yeah. Could a franchisee be considered an independent contractor?
where's Damien? No, Damien doesn't even do that anymore. A good question. So soliciting or obtaining orders, whether by mail or electronic means or through employee agents, if they require acceptance outside the state for the contracts. Creating or acquiring indebtedness in real or personal property. Securing or collecting debts or enforcing mortgages or other security interests in property. Owning real or personal property. Conducting an isolated transaction that is not one in the course of repeated transactions of a like nature, or transacting business in interstate commerce. So I can't, I I have some familiarity with franchise agreements and from my former life, but I can't give you a clean yes or no. It depends on how you set it up, how many contracts, how's the contract frame, who owns the property, who directs the employees? Is it just the licensing agreement where, they're just, I don't know. Or deliveries, who makes the deliveries? Do they come into the state from another place? Or do you own the trucks? Do you own the products? I don't know. There's all kinds of factors. So my honest answer is, should they register? I'd like them to. Under this slate of tests, I don't know.
Might not be a question for you, but do you know whether any other states that regulate franchise agreements have a specific definition about doing business?
I do not. Sorry.
Thanks, David. I think I grasped the nebulousness of this. But the following activities without more,
Mhm.
is the phrase without more what's that doing there?
Sure.
And does that have anything to do? I'm just wondering what that is in there for and if that will help us understand anything in any way.
Fair question. I don't have a definitive answer. I'd say, if it's a one-off, you buy one building, you don't regularly do business, you just occasionally do. You do just one of these things or maybe two of these things, but you don't do anything else. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not, it's a subjective analysis.
It would be more activities not among these 11 enumerated
Could be
here.
more than just what's there. And the more you do of those or other things, maybe there's a weight of evidence that piles up.
I see. Thanks.
So and even if they are a franchisor, there's no way of us knowing that they're a franchise unless it's a, well-known franchise.
I mean, if you're asking about the underlying records that we hold and whether those would indicate that they conducted activities or franchise or no. The reason being, so, there's a slate of data that you supply when you register with the Secretary of State's office. And I mean, it slightly varies sometimes among the types, but for the most part, it's, your name, your address, you can supply your principals if you want to, officers, shareholders, some entity types, that stuff's required, but most not. There is a purpose section in our module, in our workflows, because most of the state statutes require that you state the purpose for which you're formed. But, that there's sort of a universal loophole because you can form a business, most business kinds, for any lawful purpose. So that at the end of the day, maybe doesn't tell you much, right? We have it set up so that the way you communicate your purpose to the world for us is you select a next code in AICS. You can select more than one. So theoretically, could people choose that or list that as their business purpose? Sure. Are they required to? No. Is it a reliable, and sort of all-encompassing data set that would be helpful in that regard? No, not right now.
Does that language apply only to foreign limited liability companies? Are all foreign registrations LLC?
What language and
What you had just read to us from 4113.
business, doing business or not doing business?
Yeah, that seemed to be.
That provision is just for foreign LLCs, but there are comparable provisions for
I see.
other,
Thank
for
you.
like foreign
Okay,
corporations.
that was just an example.
Sure,
I see.
yeah, exactly. But the I don't know what you call them, criteria, requirements, indices.
Yeah.
They are roughly the same across. They're all built on case law, ultimately accumulated over the years that sort of built up factors without being definitive.
And the same as on the franchise side, you don't know what business in the state is the franchise, if they're franchisee as well.
Same. same situation with purpose and I don't know how often you guys hang out in like the business records, but it is a minimal amount of information, frankly. There are obviously within our purview because of other statutes, much more specific registration requirements that have much more substantive data. So telemarketers, data brokers, amusement ride operators. I mean, that's a different ball of wax than just the business that's transacting or doing activity in Vermont and has to therefore register in the generic business registry.
If we wanted to understand franchise are involved in the state and how many franchisors, franchisors, franchisees, what is that possible through your system? Is it possible to create a box that check when any new business forms and then when businesses have to re-register, your annual registration? Is it difficult to create that check box?
So what I think I like to say, or I've learned maybe in this position with respect to IT projects, is that technologically almost anything is possible. It's just a question of time and resources and statutory. So if that's something that becomes part of our charge, can we build it? I'm sure we could. I think there's different ways to do it. One model is freestanding module. It sounds like that would be overkill if all you want to know is who. Another is just like you suggested, I think you could just add a checkbox at the point of initial filing, and then maybe or at the point of periodic reporting. So I want to just not necessarily demystify, maybe clarify what the reporting requirement looks like and what we get. So for the major types of entities that are recognized in Vermont, so I'm thinking like LLCs, corporations, nonprofits, LLPs, and then we also have mutual benefit enterprises. There's not a lot of those. We have that initial filing, and if you're domestic, that's how you actually create that entity. You file the initial filing. It doesn't exist until you do so. And then you have an annual reporting requirement where, the purpose of which really is just to check the information that's on record. And you can make an update at that point if you need to. It's a relatively minor process. It's really quick, not very expensive, but it is an annual check-in. Except for nonprofits, those are every other year, but probably not who we're talking about in this case. So I guess what I want to stress is that would capture if it's initial filing and or periodic report, that probably captures, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm guessing 95% of the for-profit entities that you would want to capture. There are a handful that do not have periodic reporting requirements. And so and those are like cooperatives, partnerships, assumed business names. Those are one-time 5-year filings. So, would a franchisee set something up just under an assumed name? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't advise it, but people don't always get advice. I would recommend an entity structure, but you never know. So that would be a potential gap there if it was just set up under an assumed name, not under some entity structure. Or if they curiously chose an entity structure that wasn't subject to it. So LLP is a realistic possibility. Well, they have an annual reporting requirement, so take that one off the table. Some kind of a co-op. Probably not going to happen, but.
Probably the vast majority is going to be annual reporting.
Yeah, I would say so. At this point, the new businesses that are formed are upwards of 85, 90% LLCs. So
Okay. So, committee, I know we've walked through 733. But it's hard to imagine doing anything in the realm of regulation without first understanding what the universe is in Vermont. And I think maybe a good first step would be to require Secretary of State's office, franchisors and franchisees, check the box that they are, that's what they do, what their business is about. Kind of, I don't know that we'll find out what kind of franchise it is. But I think it gives us an idea of how many are here. I don't know how deep we can go. Or we need to go to understand what we're looking for.
if I may, I'd love to take like kind of one big step up with you and think about what this and the future of like our division might look like in the sense of what kind of data do we want to be collecting from people? Some of it mandatory, maybe some of it's voluntary. We've talked, I've talked with a lot of you over the years in different capacities, an interest in self-identified businesses that are woman, let's say, just as a way of example. And so I raise all this because it goes to where do we collect this data? How do we present it? What actually is it? Where does it live? And, when you file a formation filing or initial filing for a foreign, when you form an LLC, like you're creating the entity, but it's a very small amount of information. And I would like the opportunity to just like reflect on whether something like a checkbox like that is actually part of your formational document, or if it's just a data point that lives beside it in the system. Do you know what I mean? So it's not actually in your articles of organization, but it is data that we collect, hold, publish, push out into the world, and it's searchable and sortable. And over time, I can only anticipate that universe might grow. And if it does, I'd be loath to clog up formation filings and initial registration filings with all that stuff. I'd rather it be part of your electronic record, which is how most people use it anyway. I mean, nobody comes to my office and searches a filing cabinet for your LLC, like they go online. But I don't know if that changes the drafting. I don't think it changes the legal provision. I'm just thinking from a technical and policy sort of path forward, like how do we frame this? So I just want to put that on the table. We can talk about it more if you want.
I guess committee, that seemed like a way to move forward on franchise piece, is to actually see if we can find out what the world is in Vermont.
I think,
Franchisors, franchisees, and
I think it makes sense.
okay. So we'll chat with Rick, and maybe if you can work with Rick and think about it, David, how your thoughts on how to best move forward to get the information. That would be great.
I'm happy to do that. I can reach out to him today.
Perfect. Any questions for David or release him? Okay. Thank you, David.
Sure.
Always
Happy
good
to be
have
here.
you.
He's glad to be back.
So you're still glad to come back.
I love coming back. I do avoid making eye contact sometimes in the hallways because some people forget that I don't work here anymore and they ask me to do things. You draft me an amendment for like, well, no. I mean, I could, but I can't. All right. Well, if you have other questions, of course, I'm happy to pop over. I'm just across the street.
Great, thank you.
Otherwise, enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, you too, David. Now we'll switch to H 512, regulation of event ticketing market. So we have people here from StubHub and Ticket Policy Forum. So David, would you like to join us first?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for coming up.
Chairman, Ranking Member, Governance Committee, thank you for taking the time to talk about this issue. Today I just want to touch base quickly on who StubHub is for those that might not be familiar, and then maybe talk about 3 quick points in the legislation that we think are important. For those not familiar with StubHub, we were born 25 years ago out of simple fan frustration, a sold out show and no good way to get tickets that were available. Our founder was on Broadway on a date, looking to get tickets to The Lion King. And the way he had to do that really made him uncomfortable, right? Trying to buy those tickets on the market at the time. And when he looked at the market, he also saw another challenge on the flip side of the coin, right? All too often we buy tickets to events 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months in advance. And when life happens and plans change, trying to sell or give those tickets was really a local issue, right? You had to find family, friends, coworker that could take those tickets. I'm from New England originally. My experience is probably similar to a lot of Vermonters, right? I remember growing up, going to a Red Sox game, driving down the 2 hours to Boston, and you'd walk around the stadium, right? And you hear tickets, and you try to deal with those people. And maybe you found a ticket at the right price. And then you went to the turnstile and you did this, hoping it worked. Sometimes it didn't. And sometimes you went there and you couldn't find a ticket. So maybe you went to a museum or you went to lunch and then you drove back to Maine, where I'm from, or back to Vermont. And so the challenges that he saw was the ones I think people here and elsewhere saw. And so what StubHub is it's a platform where we just connect buyers and sellers to tickets. And so we don't own the tickets and we don't set the price of the tickets. It's kind of like the way I explain it is it's an eBay for tickets specifically, right? What that means for Vermont, we have 6,000 users last year here in Vermont. I'd also note that for Vermont specific events, that more than 50% of those buyers came from out of state. So either they came here for an event, stayed at a hotel, went to bars, restaurants, that sort of thing, or maybe they were here on vacation. And as a lot of people do, when they're on vacation, they come to our website and they say, hey, I'm going to be in Montpelier or Burlington on these dates. What events are taking place there that I can get tickets for? And so for Vermont events, we're able to bring people from out of states and get people to fill those seats. 2 quick things on StubHub, and then I'll get to legislation I think is important to note as well. 90% of our events here in North America have a ticket under $100 available. North of 60% have a ticket available for under $50. Fraud is also very rare on our site. Looking at our North American stats, it's 0.2% of orders that ever have a problem at the door. And so what StubHub is essentially able to do is take that uncomfortable process that I talked about, whether that's Red Sox or Broadway, move it online, inject consumer protections. So we have a fan protect guarantee. And so fans are able to get tickets for people they don't know. They're able to do so safely, transparently, and do something that's what we say is fan forward. So we're not a luxury platform, and we've been around for 25 years because people keep coming back to our sites because they get a ticket at the price they want, and the ticket gets them in. And that, I think, is the 2 most important things that probably we're all looking for. As it relates to the legislation itself, I think it's important to note on the front end that we support the goals and the intents of this bill, and there are provisions in here that we have long supported and are part of our policies. So one, as it relates to the speculative ticket ban that's in the legislation, so that would prohibit the sale of tickets that you don't have physical or constructive possession of. That's against our policy and something we support. We spent strong action on deceptive websites, right? Those websites that confuse fans, deceive fans. You should go there to a website and think you're buying from an official box office when it's not. So we support provisions like that in the bill. 3 points we think we'd like to make on that. One is as it relates to those deceptive websites, the language that's proposed, we are concerned that it's just overly broad. What I note is that the way it's written, they would be difficult for legitimate platforms like StubHub to even advertise to our customers who the show is or where it is. I don't think that's the goal of legislation. I think you want to defend things that are deceptive. We have worked with states in probably nearly a dozen states right now to pass deceptive website language. Connecticut's a good model. We just think there's some technical changes to tighten that up to address the needs. The biggest challenge we see in the bill, maybe unsurprising, is the price cap provision in the bill. We recognize the instinct and how appealing that is. The concern is that what we've seen both through research and in real world evidence is that when you put the price caps in place, you're not changing the market, you're moving the market. So you're preventing regulated businesses like StubHub from putting in the price caps, but then all of those tickets move to whether that's, classified ads, whether that's social media, Facebook Marketplace, TikTok, believe it or not, Instagram. And we've seen fraud go 4x in some of these places where price caps are in place. And so it doesn't, because we have the consumer protections, it really doesn't help the consumer. It hurts them by moving the market to fraud. I know there's been a lot of talk about the Maine bill. I am from Maine. I'm a Maine evangelist, so this is really going to pain me to talk about. It's important to note that the Maine bill is the exception and not the rule. When you look at, again, because of what StubHub did and other companies followed, moving that unregulated market to a regulated market, a lot of states repealed their price caps, right? So Florida did it in 2006, Minnesota, Connecticut in 2007. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the fact that in 2024, Massachusetts repealed their price cap. Just last year, Connecticut looked at a robust ticketing bill. Price caps was included. They removed it before passing it through the House 147-0. So yes, a lot of states are looking at it. The trend seems to be to repeal or to strip those provisions. We think that's important to note. And again, it's because when you start digging deep into it, the goal of it is not what's achieved with it. Last thing I'll say, I think, I talk about price caps. When states are removing that, it's not that they're not looking at the challenges or the problems within ticketing. Exactly the opposite. They are looking at it and they're just seeing more robust ways. And I think there's other provisions states are looking at that's not included in the Vermont bill that could be improved. And I apologize, I'm going to read this to make sure I get it right. And I picked some red and blue states here. For example, Utah in 2019 looked at anti-retaliation measures so people can't be retaliated against for reselling their tickets. Very important, especially in today's world where Ticketmaster is really trying to expand their monopoly into the resale market. Also, making sure fans can't get denied entry simply because they bought a ticket on a secondary platform that we're seeing happen. Utah then in 23 put in disclosure requirements. They did deceptive URLs. They increased their bot enforcement, something that's not in the Vermont bill that we think would be great. And they put in refund requirements for fans, which we think would be a great add to this bill. 24 bipartisan legislation. Bots, again, they put all in pricing so that fans, the first time they see the price, it's the price they end up paying. That's something we implemented in 2014, tried to do. We think it's important to do statutorily. They banned deceptive websites. They also did refund language. And the reason I say this is a great example, Democratic Governor Polis signed that bill. When that bill was signed, it was signed at Red Rocks, iconic US venue. Colorado PERG was there. Other stakeholders were there. They really addressed the concerns in the industry. Just last year, Oregon did a really robust stakeholder process, included stakeholders, independent venues, that sort of thing. They went after bot enforcement and deceptive URLs, again, in a way that we think was helpful. So we think there's good, strong, important provisions that can be added to the bill. Again, what I'd say on the deceptive URLs is a technical change. And again, we're really concerned, and there's a lot of evidence and happy to get into it, whether that's Ireland or France or Australia or otherwhere. I'll use one last example on price caps in Ontario. They've passed a 50% price cap in Ontario in 2017. They realized it was unenforceable and drove people to the black market. They repealed it in 2019. So I think that's some of the challenges that I think they were well-intentioned. It just became a challenge. So I know that's a lot. I'm happy to take any questions. But again, I do want to reiterate that we hope to work with you, and there's strong provisions in this bill that we support.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, all the examples that you just gave, I really definitely, if we're going to consider any of those, want to make sure that we hear from Vermont venues on those, especially tracking consumer protection bills in Colorado. I'm not sure that we want to align with everything that's been going on. But so doing a search last night for the infamous String Dusters, Paramount had a sale for those tickets of $73. They were listed on StubHub for $120 as the best deal. I'm just curious, like with your call for transparency and saying that you don't want to be deceptive and extractive of our small venues, I'm just curious how you can justify the best deal being on StubHub for those tickets for $120 when tickets are available from the Paramount directly for $73.
And so a couple things on that I'll address it in detail, but a lot of times we get those questions, right? X ticket that's available on your site that's higher. One thing I always highlight to people on the front end is if it's there, it's because it hasn't sold, right? That's why I note that the sale price in so many of our shows are less than that, right? If the seller determines what price I'm going to try to sell it at, it's a buyer that ultimately determines the price. If I want to go to that show and I'm looking for tickets, I may see a price that's very high and decide not to buy. I'll look at other tickets and find a lower price, right? So everything that you see that's on the site that's extremely high is there because it hasn't sold. And by the way, it may never sell or never sell at that price. It'll get dropped down. You said it was the best deal. I forget the exact quote. Best deal.
Yeah. That seems very deceptive.
Yeah. And what I just say is because we have the information that's on our site. And so that we look at what's available on our site.
That was on StubHub.
Yeah, no, but it's the best deal on our site. And I think just like, by the way, and that's no different than if you look at a retailer, like a lot of times they, Target may say this is the best deal we have, or it's marked down, and it might be higher at Walmart or Amazon or whatever, right? And so I don't think it's any different than in some cases a retail market, so to speak.
So Tony, I think you had your hand up.
I did. Take me back to the fraud. You mentioned 0.2%. So what is your mechanism for collecting reports of fraud? Is it something that how do you even find out that there's fraud?
Yeah. So it was 0.2% of orders, right, have a problem at the door. So we hear from our customers when they go to the door and they have a problem with their tickets, they call StubHub, right, and say, "Hey, I bought tickets from you. It didn't work." And so that happens. And the other thing I just note on that, right? We sold 40 million tickets last year. As I note, that means if it's a 1 in a million chance it happens 40 times on our site, right? And so, yes, there's going to be anecdotal evidence of challenges, but it's not the norm. We wouldn't be in business and have repeat customers for 25 years if that was the norm. And we do a number of things to prevent fraud on the front end as well.
So if I could follow up on that, in listening to testimony of a lot of our venue operators here, oftentimes they'll just let them in anyway. So you wouldn't know about those. So my question would be, now do you offer a refund to the ticket holder if you find out it's fraud?
Yeah, so one, chances are they did call us, right? Maybe they got in, but before they got in, they're not happy about not being let in. Their first call is to StubHub. And what I note is, I think this is why it's so important to go after the deceptive websites and the bad actors, because I bet their fraud numbers are a lot higher than ours. So for example, one of the things we do to try to prevent fraud on the front end is the seller does not get paid until the buyer gets in. So if you bought that ticket a month ago, you will get the ticket. We essentially hold the funds. And if we find out there's a problem there and you don't get in, the seller doesn't get their money. They can be penalized up to 2x the cost of the ticket. And if it's a real problem, they'll get banned from our site. So we create disincentives in the system to prevent. That's just one example of what we do to prevent fraud from happening on our site. I don't want this to be that I don't think what the venues are saying is accurate. I think what they're saying probably does happen. What I'm saying is when you look at legitimate platforms like StubHub, we're doing so much and the numbers show that there's decreased fraud, that our concern is we think that's why you should go after the deceptive websites and really attack where the problem is, and just be concerned about provisions that may, like the price caps, that may move customers into markets that are more fraudulent.
All right, I'm gonna one more.
Does that answer your question? I don't
It
want to be
does, it
just,
does.
I don't want, if it's too vague, please let me know.
No. I just will end with this comment is that what we've heard from our venue operators at the door, they give them new tickets. So why they've got into the show, why would they have an incentive to call StubHub? And you don't need to answer that question. That's just, what I'm trying to illustrate. I don't know how accurate those fraud numbers are. Because
And let me dig into that to see if we can get better info, and I'll talk to our product folks and happy to follow up. What I would just generally say about human nature is they are very, as you know, you'll probably get more constituents unhappy with you calling you than those praising you. No different from us, where we certainly hear from folks that have challenges. And so, the consumer is quick to pick up the phone.
To follow up on Tony's point, I'm searching the StubHub website. I'm in the customer service portal. First, it took me quite a while to even find a phone number. I know that chat service is possible, but it's actually not even on the first page. So I'm curious, like, how the inflow of that information for unsatisfied customers is happening. So I'm imagining if I'm on the fly in the moment and I'm having issues with my tickets, it's going to be a lot of searching, a lot of page moving, and a lot of really trying to find some very small print to find the actual phone number that I can call and get the in-person immediate help that I need. So can you walk through what is the process in which you're intaking all of this information?
Yeah, and one thing I note, don't forget that people who have bought a ticket from StubHub have communicated with us, not just on the website, right? So we've sent them information on how to transfer the tickets and things of that nature.
Okay.
And so I'm happy to get you exactly where, if in that process, where we tell them, hey, and if you have a challenge, here it is.
Yeah,
Whether that's in the, because the consumer is probably, if you have a challenge at the door, your instinct is probably not to go to the website, but to go to your communications that you've had with StubHub in the process, in this, I'll call it the sale process, broadly speaking. So, that's probably where they're getting a lot of that information.
Thank you.
So I also went on to your website and checked it against the Flynn regarding kinky boots, which I feel like we should do a field trip. That being said, on their website, after fees are assessed and everything, it was $100 for a balcony seat row F. And on StubHub, it was $140. I'm not I'm not overly part of me is not really concerned about the markup as much as the disclosure of it. Cause I'll be honest, if I was looking at this, $140, I'm probably not gonna go. $100, that's a different story for me. It may not be a lot for some people, but for me, $40 is like two, two meals with something.
And percentage wise,
Right, and so you have a problem with the increase, like, or how much you're allowed to charge. What about a full disclosure stating that technically these tickets are available for $100?
so one thing I just note on that, again, they're not our tickets and we don't have the price. We're not aware of the price paid. And while it's easy to say the Flynn in this specific case, what we see a lot as well in live event ticketing, where it's going, we see more of is dynamic pricing. So think of pricing like an Uber or an airline, where you know that if you're in seat 13A, you paid X and the person next to you may have paid a different price. So the only person that knows what they paid for that ticket is the consumer. The ticket's not ours and we didn't purchase it and we don't have insight to what that cost is. So StubHub it's not like we bought it from the Flynn, so to speak, and we're reselling it. We wouldn't be able to verify that ticket was for X. Now, listen, I mentioned hotels and airlines. We would love an open distribution system where we could verify all of those tickets, just like they do in hotels and in airlines. So we could help verify some of these tickets. The challenge becomes that the primary ticketing, whether that's Ticketmaster or anyone else, they don't want to share that information. And so that's the challenge we face, is they block us out in the system, unlike what you can do with airlines and hotels and things of that nature.
So it sounds like part of what we're dealing with is StubHub is not interacting with venues, and much of the testimony we've taken has been about venues and their experience of seeing fraudulent and deceptive websites that are either experiencing an extraordinary markup, something sort of ridiculous, but there's an element of this bill about prohibiting speculative ticket sales, in which the ticket is not in the possession of any individual. And we're trying to manage that. And I think what I'm sort of picking up from this testimony is that part of what we're looking at is an exchange that someone is hoping to get for a ticket they will not be using, that they list, like, I've paid whatever I paid, I'm hoping to get this amount of money. I'm curious if I could hear your thoughts on where speculative activity begins and ends from StubHub's perspective.
Yeah, so speculative tickets are prohibited on our policy, on our website via our policy. And I think with speculative tickets, the important thing to note here, and this legislation does it, is you often think of the ticket in your possession. The important part is that it's in your physical or constructive possession. And the reason I say that is the easiest example is if you are a season ticket holder, right? The tickets may not be out yet, but you know that in 6 months when you see the schedule that your cousin's getting married that weekend, and so you list it on our website. You don't have the ticket in your hand yet, but you obviously have an ownership, for lack of a better expression, of that. So I think that's the key, because I think sometimes when we talk about speculative tickets, it's kind of looped in even if you don't have the physical ticket, and that's just inaccurate.
And from StubHub's perspective, if an individual acquired a ticket from a fraudulent website that was artificially inflated, et cetera, they had no knowledge of the venue's pricing through just ignorance or deceptive practices. Does StubHub have a way of flagging that? It's like,
Yeah.
here isn't is there some way that that individual who was defrauded, or who fell, I should say, prey to deceptive practices, is there any way is there any role StubHub plays in addressing that situation prior to that, when that individual lists it for sale? I'm curious if that's an area where you have any.
Yeah, so two pieces to that, right? The activity on the front end, let's say it was purchased, I'll say fraudulently or illegally. And then on the flip side, it's someone that may have purchased that ticket, right? So On the front end, if we're made aware, we do investigate and look into whether if it was done, it was purchased illegally. Certainly we take action in that, and you can get kicked off our website for it, right? So we prevent that on the front end and do what we can, and there's mechanisms to try to look at that, right? Listen, let's say, I'm going to make up an example. You've never sold a ticket on our website, and then all of a sudden you're trying to sell 3,000 World Cup tickets or something like that. That may ping as something that's like, it pings, it's something that's a anomaly, so it gets flagged. And again, I just want to reiterate, if you purchase it illegally via a bot or something like that, we're aware that that's banned. On the fraudulent side, on the officer, right? I've heard stories of people that, hey, you know what, there was a problem with the tickets. StubHub found out 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance. And this is where I get back to our fan protect guarantee. Our goal is not to refund people. Our goal is to get them in the event, right? We are obsessed with that. And so the first thing we do if there's a challenge or we see there's a problem with that ticket, we'll go on our website, we'll purchase it, and we'll say, hey, you know what? We just got you equal or better tickets. Here's your upgrade, right? That's where the majority of what I'll call challenges, how they get resolved. And then in the rare occasions where you get to the door and you have a problem, we still try to do that. And then we consider this a failure. But if you really have a problem, you don't get into the show, you can either get 100% of your money back or 120% as a voucher.
So let's say I want to buy tickets to a show and I do a Google search and a bunch of things show up. Like, how do I know StubHub is a reseller? Like, as a consumer, how would I know that StubHub is reselling a ticket? The main place to get tickets.
Okay, I also want to look at the website. I think it says resale somewhere on there. I'll double check that. But I'll say this as well. Fans want to get a ticket to the show or the concert or the game at the price they want and that ticket to go in. It's just like, some people buy on united.com, some people buy on bookings.com, or some people buy on kayak.com. Where the ticket is purchased, or if that's a sale or a resale, most consumers, it's not something they're concerned about. And so they want to get the ticket at the right price and get into the show. I'll also note we have a lot of partnerships with different organizations where they list directly on our site. So while the vast majority of our site, and I should note, 99% of sellers on our site are fan sellers, even for big events. So Taylor Swift, for example, 83% of sellers on our site for Taylor Swift were first-time sellers. So it really is largely fans. And so, it's really fan to fan selling those tickets in the large part.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, because you guys are incentivized for kind of the resale price, and I know when I asked the first question, you didn't set that price, and that makes sense. But you're still making a percentage off the price. And so I'm just curious, like, as far as going off Rep Booten's question about the disclaimer kind of thing, I'm curious if when somebody lists something for resale, if you would be supportive of a disclosure from that reseller that where they have to put in the original price that they paid for it, they have to put a link into the venue that they bought it from, and have the disclaimer have that shown on the ticket to the person who's buying a thing that also says there may still be tickets available at the original venue where this ticket was bought.
And I think, not surprisingly, right, devil's in the details, right? A couple of things on that. One, if the consumer has to put it in there, how do we verify that that's accurate, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, with
putting, and this is a challenge too. For us, I'll be honest with you. When you say like putting the actual ticket in there, here's the challenge, right? How often do you buy a ticket 4 months in advance And I think especially in bigger shows that are like, for example, with Ticketmaster, they won't send you the ticket until 24, 48, 72 hours in advance. So you can't upload the ticket to verify it because there is no ticket, right? And with the dynamic pricing, it's really hard to verify because the same ticket, depending on when it was purchased, is TBD. So I think we'd be happy to work with you on something that works. I just want to flag there's some challenges there logistically, especially in cases where the ticket doesn't exist yet. And I'll give you another perfect example of where this can get challenging in the kind of bigger picture of live event ticketing. If you are a season ticket holder, for example, for the New England Patriots, part of your deal might be that you have access to tickets first before before a concert comes there. So they could list that ticket for sale. They know they're going to have access to it, but they don't even have a receipt yet. But it's theirs because contractually they have it. And I think that's where people are really surprised. I think we all get that fan club members get access beforehand, or you've got the right credit card, you can get it before the general on sale. Federally, the GAO and the state of New York has looked at this. What people are really surprised to hear is that it can be anywhere from 10 to 46% of tickets are what goes to the general public. The rest are held back for insiders. So there's a large number of tickets before general on sale that are already in the market. So a lot of times those are on our site. People will say, how could StubHub have access to tickets before they go on the general on sale? And the reality is it can be north of half. It could be 90% of tickets that are available before general on sale. We think one thing that would be important is requiring disclosure of how many tickets are available at general on sale. So fans know that it's a 10,000 seat stadium or a 4,000 seat stadium, but only 1,000 are available at the general on sale. 3,000 are already out there in the market. And that's a disclosure. But long story short, happy to work with you on that. I just want to work on some specific challenges, but happy to work with you.
So that's coming in, Representative Herb Olson. I'm having trouble understanding, or like help me understand. I think you said a statement earlier in your testimony that your problem with a cap of any sort, I guess, is that it doesn't make the market, it moves the market. And I'm thinking about that, and tell me if I'm wrong, it sort of assumes that some company like good actor company like you wouldn't be able to really do business, and so you're not going to be offering that, and therefore it moves to bad actors. And I'm wondering if that's a comment on the level of the cap as opposed to cap at all. And that gets to, what's a reasonable cap? Does it cover, the reasonable cost of what you're doing? So that's my question.
No, that's fair. And I'll just point again to Ontario that did 50%, put it into law and repealed it 2 years later, because there's an enforcement challenge here too, right? So it's enforcement and moving the market. But on the market specific.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Did the Ontario scheme go into effect so they knew that it was moving to bad actors?
Yeah. So the law passed in 2017. They repealed it in 2019. So they had 2 years of, 2 years of evidence, and that's for the committee to decide if that's enough or not. But that's and that was at 50%. As far as moving the market, if it's, being from Maine, I'm a big Rustic Overtones fan. They rarely come. They probably don't anymore come to where I live. If they were to come, I'd be passionate about going to that event, right? And a lot of the live events people are passionate about going to. Maybe it's because you're going to the Red Sox game and Ohtani's pitching. Maybe you're from California and the Giants are in town. So what we're just generally dealing with are events that people are excited to see and people love. And so when you take that, their value, what the buyer sees as the value varies. As I like to say, my wife likes country music. You couldn't pay me to go to that show, but she would pay, maybe 25% more than what's there. So what the value is really hard to determine in what we sell because it's experiences. And again, when you look at Ireland, when you look at Australia, when you look at France, where they have price caps, the market, they've had, the Bank of Ireland has put out warnings that say, hey, careful of scams and fraud because they're not available on the legitimate. I mean, just this week, the California AG had to put out a press release for the Super Bowl to say, be careful of scams, right? And that becomes even more prevalent when there's a price caps.
Can I follow up? Because again, I think you're saying the market is going to move to bad actors, but isn't that only the case if you're not in the business? If you don't continue to do business, and that strikes me as you're thinking that a particular price cap isn't enough to do business.
No, and I apologize. I see what you're saying now, and I didn't answer that question correctly. Let's say there's a $100 ticket and there's a 10% price cap. StubHub, as a regulated market, as a business, we will not sell that ticket for $120, right? But the market, the demand, supply and demand economics say that ticket is actually worth or could sell for $150. There will be people that then move to Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist ads and classified ads and TikTok and Instagram, and they'll say, you know what? I'm not going to sell that ticket at $110 on StubHub. I can go over here on Facebook Marketplace and sell it for $150 because they're not enforcing that, right? And then what happens is that's where the market moves, and that's where fraud and scam says, you know what? We see the market's at $150, StubHub selling that at $110. They're going to place those tickets on sale at $125. So you think it's real but not a good deal. And we've seen people sell hundreds of the same ticket on Facebook Marketplace, and then the seller just disappears from Marketplace. So I'm not saying that from a StubHub perspective, we couldn't do business, though I think there's serious challenges there. What I'm trying to focus on is the consumer, and that the market, when I say the market, the demand will move over to places that don't have like a fan protect guarantee like us. It will go back. It will take the street scalping that I talked about the Red Sox game, move it to the 21st century with online scams and fraud. And by the way, that's not theoretical. That's what we've seen in other places, and we have specifics that we can point to on that.
Thank you. I still have questions, but thank you.
Emily?
I have two questions. On that, I'm curious to know if in those situations, did you see a decrease in your market share in the areas that have instituted price cap?
So let me go back and check, because a lot of it, unsurprisingly, because price caps don't exist in broadly don't exist in the United States, and I do US work. I'm hesitant to comment on market share in Europe that I don't work on, but I'm happy to get, Canada. I'm happy to get that information. I don't want to be evasive. I just want to make sure I get you the right information.
Appreciate that. And my other question is, when folks are, because you guys don't do the selling of the tickets, so you don't set the prices for it. Correct. So when the person is uploading, or whoever is uploading the ticket, do you require proof of purchase or proof of confirmation in that process?
So the challenge is there's cases where they don't have it. And this is where it goes back to the speculative tickets. It's so important to have the constructive possession as well, because there are cases, again, I use that season ticket holder that may not have the receipt yet or have now that being said, we do investigate when we're aware, and we do a lot of things on the front end to prevent fraud. But there just are cases where, a perfect example, Oasis came to the US, I think it was last year, and a letter went out to Congress that said, StubHub, these tickets are not available to the general public. These are fake speculative tickets, and Congress should do something. We looked into that, and then we were able to show Congress that actually Bears season ticket holders and others had constructive rights to those tickets and they weren't speculative tickets. They were actually real tickets because they had as part of their agreement as season ticket holders. So that's where the challenge becomes, is that we would love to be able to verify. We think open distribution is the way to do it. Just like, again, look at airlines. Ticketing is essentially two phases. One, you have the back end, which is the ledger that says, hey, section 102, row E, seat 12 is purchased. And then you have the retail side, right, where you're purchasing. We would love from the retail side to be able to verify the back end. The problem is at the primary level, unlike other places where you want to distribute your merchandise or product to multiple sellers, primary ticket a lot of times includes exclusive contracts that don't allow you to do that. And they don't allow us to tap into their system like Major League Baseball does, like other airlines do. And that would be the solution. We would love to be able to verify those speculative tickets. But if the primary ticket issuer is not willing to let us use technology to verify that the ticket has been purchased, that's where it becomes a challenge. So we want to work with the primary ticket sellers to say, just like Major League Baseball, just like other industries, let us verify that that's a ticket.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point. I am curious about the example that you used for the season ticket holder. I'm assuming that somewhere in their contract or somewhere in some sort of confirmation, there is something that says you have rights to tickets at the stadium from whatever. So I'm curious as like a potential fix to be able to actually, because there are other things, if you want to do a rebate, right? You got to supply proof of purchase. So I'm curious if that is something.
But I just note that the text in this legislation would ban exactly that. Speculative tickets. So I actually don't think there needs to be a larger fix that's in the current text. Because the current text would ban.
Oh, I'm not talking about speculative ticket. I'm just talking in general.
Oh, okay.
If somebody is uploading a ticket to the site, assuming that they legitimately purchased that ticket from the original venue or the ticket seller, that they would have some sort of confirmation to upload and say, hey, I did that.
Yeah. To put it into scale, we sold 40 million tickets in 200 countries. There are big venues, small venues, there's sports, there's whatever. To verify at scale that what is entered there it could be a challenge. Again, I think we do other things to prevent fraud. That's why our North American numbers are at 0.2%.
And Michael?
So from my perspective, I'm less concerned about price caps than I am about consumer notification and consumers understanding that it's a reseller versus a primary seller. And so I've been playing around with, my daughter is a Luke Bryan fan, and turns out he's at the Bank of New Hampshire Pavilion in May, so maybe we'll go. And so I was looking at, if I was a consumer buying tickets, would I understand that StubHub is a reseller? And both StubHub and a couple of your competitors, on the first page in small font at the very top, it says StubHub is the world's top destination for ticket buyers and resellers. Prices may be higher or lower than face value. Right? I think that's clear, right? In that little font, like once you're like, oh, look, May 29th, 7 p.m., see tickets, you don't ever see that again. And I think that's the place that you would know that it's a reseller. And so I'd be interested in, and I'm guessing that that's a requirement somewhere in the country or that you need to have, right? Seems like a good assumption. And I'd be curious about what it could look like to have maybe a reseller notification that goes deeper into the process, so that it's not so that because you wouldn't, most people, you go to this first page, you're looking for Luke Bryan, you're not looking at the top of the page. So that's something I'd be interested in. If you'd be amenable to that, if you have thoughts on that, where it says see tickets, you click on see tickets, could there be a notification that continues into the process saying, we're a reseller. Hey, just so you know, we're a reseller. So it's not.
And like I said, it's not out there on the first page. Our goal is not to deceive customers. So if you think there's ways to improve that, happy to talk to you. The one thing, and this is what I was going to say, and I lost my train of thought last time you asked a question that I'd want to know. We are largely a reseller, but I will note that we have partnerships as well. And people can, so if you are a sports team or a venue, you may choose to put tickets directly on sale at StubHub. And you can do that today. You may do that because you know what? I use that tourism example. Hey, you know what? There are people that just go to StubHub because they don't know about the Paramount or the Flynn Theater, right? If they're coming from out of town. So they go to StubHub to see. And those venues, I don't know if those two particularly, but like there are other sports teams and venues that list directly. So those aren't resale. We have partnerships as well with Broadway and others that they put that. So I'll note that we are currently largely resale, but it is not uniquely resale. There are cases where I'll call them rights holders, right, are listing directly on our site as well. So I wouldn't, I just note that we might not want to say that these are all. I just wouldn't note we are largely resale.
But that's.
But I do want to note that the industry is changing where, again, just like people are going to kayak and saying, can I compare on multiple sites? The tourism industry is huge. People experiential is becoming huge. People are going on StubHub because they know they're going to be in X city and they just want to know what's there. And teams and venues are recognizing that. And so listing direct on our site as well.
I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with that. I mean, the disclosure part of it is really important because again, I looked again, Book of Mormon, March.
I'm seeing a trend.
Yes. In March, it's 135 at the Flynn, and I pulled it up here. It's $656. But I don't know. I know that ticket is not available on the Flynn, so I'm assuming that was uploaded, correct?
I have to look at I don't want to comment on an exact listing,
Right.
but
Well,
yes.
I don't see it.
What you're saying is you went back to the primary and said that ticket's unavailable, so you're connecting. Yep.
Right. I'm assuming that that's somebody that's reselling their ticket.
Mhm.
I, as a consumer, have no idea that that's the case. And I think, to get back to what Abby was saying, I think that part of it is extremely important. Because if I knew that this was the equivalent of a scalper at a venue, I would probably not. No offense, I just wouldn't.
No. And listen, I think what we would say is fans should have choices, right? Different. But to your point about transparency and that, if we can work with you on better disclosures, but we're happy to have that conversation.
So I'm thinking of, so what we're talking about is the experience of the person going into the show. But I feel like a lot of what we had sort of taken testimony on to date has been about the venues themselves that found that they were being misrepresented, that their imagery was being used to provide a fig leaf for deceptive practices that made people think, I'm buying a ticket from the blank theater in Vermont. I'm looking forward to going out. A lot of the testimony that we had heard referred to people being deceived. And so I understand that there is a market for ticket resale, just as there always has been. And I had felt that the goal of our legislation, the focus had been about protecting the venues that are ultimately seeing their reputations being tarnished by people who are upset. And, it's not clear to them that the theater didn't charge you that, but one of the things that came up as I was looking through this legislation was, as written, it seemed to perhaps prevent any resale from taking place because it has language about, affiliated, and I'd like to hear, I think at the beginning of testimony, you'd mentioned that seemed overly broad, but what I would like to know is, I want to make sure that this legislation protects those theaters from deceptive practices, from reputational harm, from people who are associating what they're mad about with that theater.
100%.
I'm sort of satisfied that with this particular business, that you're not buying a ticket from a theater. This is called StubHub. It's not and so what I did want to know is how this language can limit the activity of the people that we don't want doing this to our venues anymore. And that's really that's the consumer, you might say, that I'm hoping to protect through this legislation. So how do we get your concerns in this language assuaged?
Yeah, and we had these exact conversations in Connecticut, and they were able to strike that balance. And the easiest way I can kind of describe it is is all about the domain name. And by that, I mean, you should not be able to put official Dave Garapi venue officialseller.com, right? Because that's in the domain name, right? So you need to protect the usage of that in the domain. What is common practice, not just in ticketing, but generally, is you may go on StubHub, and when you're on that exact page to look at Luke Bryant tickets, it may say subhub.com/Luke.Bryant. That's not deceptive. So what we need to do is make sure we cater it towards the domain name and other fraudulent activity, not say that no one selling tickets absent the venue or the artist can use the venue or artist name. Using the name is not deceptive. Using it, for example, in a domain is where it's deceptive. And I'm happy to provide the language from Connecticut. I don't want to speak for them. I believe it passed 147-0, but I also think the Attorney General's office weighed in on it as well. And so we think that's just the right balance to do exactly what you discussed.
You see, and with that in mind, like one of the things that one of the people giving testimony had shown us a sort of just a warren of website names that are just popping up around a show, and it all seems like something that you would very search engine optimization, minded.
Yep.
Does StubHub partner? Is there a way in which StubHub is assisting states in passing this legislation in sort of helping to cure that or prevent those tickets acquired through those websites from?
I think we're at nearly a dozen states where we've worked with states to pass what we would call appropriate, good, balanced, deceptive website language. And in a lot of cases, like I use Colorado, right? When the venues, StubHub and Colorado Perg are all saying this is the right language, we think that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, to carry Jonathan's point one step further, a lot of the venues are really concerned because they end up being at the point of glance the only contact that fraudulent ticket holder has. Now, you state that, first you identify StubHub, so there's not that conflict. But you state that in your correspondence with somebody who uses your site and buys a ticket, that, if you have a problem, call this. Could you share with us some of that kind of communication that you use so we can look at it?
Yeah, happy to. Yep.
And, maybe work that into something. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to follow up with them.
So you're primarily a reseller. And the tickets that you list are the tickets that people have put up for sale. Is that correct?
Yeah, so 99% of the resellers on our site are fans.
And so, but you don't go back and check with the venue you don't coordinate in a way to find out whether or not these tickets are.
Again, that's something we'd love to be able to verify more, but that when the primary is blocking us from accessing and being able to verify, that's where the challenge becomes. That's the difference between ticketing and what I'll say airlines and hotels, right?
How do you know if, for example, there's only 3% of the tickets available at that venue still available?
No, because I assume you're referencing a listing that says 3% of tickets.
I am.
Yes, we know what's on our site.
You're saying only 3% of tickets are left. Are you talking about 3% of tickets that are on your site?
Yes.
As opposed to 3% of tickets available at the venue?
Yep.
So do you not, I don't know that would be clear to me. It wasn't clear to me now.
So you're, for lack of a better analogy, your eBay of ticket selling.
Yeah.
Because when I go on eBay, I know the dealer that's actually selling me the tickets. And there are direct dealers that are selling. I shouldn't say dealer, that doesn't sound right.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, because when I go on here, it looks like it's coming from StubHub. It's not a third party. Whereas if I go to eBay, it tells me the seller's information, what their score of how well they are, all that information. And I'm sure we all have, our stories of eBay and how we didn't get the product. And I'm wondering how you would feel about not catering, but modifying the legislation to make you, I should not make you, but well, in Vermont, yeah, more like, so we know this is not coming from you. This is coming from Michael in Vermont, right? Where there's a direct communication, because you can email, I think you can email sellers on eBay. And use email, eBay like decades. That's not true. I think I did just use it, but
Yeah. So it's the first time I've been asked that question. So let me look into it. What I'd say that where we're a little bit different is because it's all digital, right? You don't have to physically mail and that sort of thing, right? We are just passing it through and we're actually getting you the tickets. The other complicated factor here, so Ticketmaster controls 80% of the primary market. They are in a lawsuit with the Department of Justice and 40 AGs, including Vermont, on a number of anti-competitive practices, including with their safe technology that restricts transfer. What they're saying is we control 80% of the market. We only want you to transfer on Ticketmaster. So, which is, again, being litigated at the moment. And I say that because for Ticketmaster tickets, you're actually not even transferring the tickets on StubHub. StubHub is requiring our users to go to Ticketmaster to transfer the tickets because they're blocking us from doing it. The consumer doesn't want that. The seller doesn't want that. And so in that case where it's a Ticketmaster transaction and you're buying the tickets on StubHub, but you're transferring them via Ticketmaster, we actually might not have insight on who that is. So one thing I would just flag to your example, I think on the front end that it's resale, that it's not ours, something like that might be doable. What I don't know if it's as applicable is saying that it is Mike from Montpelier, because the transaction might be on Ticketmaster and that's where the transaction's actually taking place. That's the challenge in this industry.
right, but I wonder if we could write legislation to prevent that from happening, but that being said,
We welcome that conversation. Not surprisingly, by the way. Can we take questions about that for the next 20 minutes? I'd love to talk about it.
I do think that it would be extremely beneficial for people in the state of Vermont to know, across the United States, to know that this is not you selling it, and to be able to actually access the actual deal, right, sell it, and know that it's pretty clear.
And again, because of the complexities, number of players, let me get back to you on how doable that second part is. Because again, in those cases where it is a Ticketmaster transaction, I just want to make sure that that's feasible.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that point, so I'm a big crafter, so I buy digital patterns all the time.
Nice.
And I would just suggest maybe looking at a place like Ravelry, where it is most, I think if people are really dealing in physical objects, I don't typically know. I mean, they're selling digital patterns. Sometimes they have a capability where you can sell it through the actual website and download it there, or you can get bopped out to somebody's blog or their own website and sell it through there. So there's some flexibility. You're able to kind of, as you're building the profiles and what the users are able to talk to each other and understand and be verified and like that sort of stuff. So I also look at something like Etsy, we're oftentimes dealing with the actual, physical objects, but also digital. There are, I think, potentially models that could allow for that profile building and that trust between sellers and purchasers that StubHub is meant to be facilitating, to kind of beef up, that possibility. So, yeah.
I guess a couple things on the Ticketmaster, and Live Nation type of stuff and the lawsuit going on and all that kind of. We don't have any of those venues in Vermont, so it's a little bit like.
I appreciate that. Yeah, use that as an example, top of mind, but I fully appreciate that.
Totally, but and in a related, like Ticketmaster does allow the no transfer, except for face value to keep from scalping. But relatedly, just I would actually love to, like you're saying, Ticketmaster blocks, and I totally respect that, but would love to hear the Vermont venues respond to everything you're saying as far as ways they want to make it easy for you to be able to verify. It's like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use Ticketmaster, not surprisingly. It's the behemoth in the industry, and fully aware of their oddly lack of presence here in Vermont. One thing I would just note on fan exchanges, that should be an option for fans, 100%. And I know a lot of people focus on the lack of increase in ticket prices on fan exchanges. What they also have naturally in fan exchanges is they have a price floor. You can only sell them at that price. So the challenge becomes, and I've done this when I was a legislative staffer in Massachusetts, session started running late unexpectedly. I bought those tickets X amount of time before. I realized day of session was going to be late. I'm not going to make that event. So I took a $70 ticket and I sold it for $40 just to try to get my money back, right? I've done that more recently now. My wife and I were supposed to go to a show. The babysitter canceled 2 days before. We just got our money back. I didn't want to sell at face value and compete with everybody at $50, $75. I wanted to list them lower and recoup some of my money back. Fan exchanges don't allow for that. And at times, and I appreciate Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster doesn't either. So what we would just argue is those are good. They should exist. It can't only be that, because we also have to allow for tickets to go under that price so that I, as a seller, can recoup some of my money. And as a buyer, I might be able to get a last minute deal. Listen, perfect example, you're going to a Red Sox game, the weather looks iffy, you don't want to make the trek, but someone in Boston's willing to take that last minute deal. They're going to sell that lower. It's a win-win for everybody. So I think the fan exchanges are a good model. They should be an option, but I think people forget about the price floor that inherently exists in that. And that's where we point to a lot of our sales that are under what we'll call face value.
So do you have some idea of the cost of the sale? So in other words, your cost of doing business for each ticket. So that would be less, I guess, the event price, and less any market. Do you have some idea of what the cost of that resale would be?
The cost of the resale. So it'd be hard to do per ticket transaction. What I'd say is, again, I go back to the fact that we don't have the tickets, so we make zero on the actual sale of the ticket, right? Our revenue comes from the fees that are attached with that vary depending on event. And the example I use on percentages is percentages can be high or low, because there are $5 tickets for sporting events that a $2 fee is a high percentage, right? So that varies. What I'd say is, with all of those fees, what you get is the Fan Protect guarantee, is the customer service, is the consumer protections that exist at StubHub that don't exist in other places. So it's not, I'd have to look to see if we have a per transaction cost fee. But what I'd say broadly is that what those fees go to are things like the customer service, where we get endless amount, to have the 24/7 customer service is is a cost. To have the Fan Protect guarantees is a cost. To make sure that the credit card information that you're sharing that is safe has a cost, and preventing you from having those cash exchanges and meeting up with someone on Craigslist is this is the safe alternative. So what I'd say is the fee cost goes to the safety we provide. I'd have to look to see if we have a more specific per transaction, what that costs.
Because I understand those are costs doing business. I'm just curious what they are.
They are.
Turn.
You know what? It just hit me. I don't think you've asked a question, have you? You've been quietly listening and plotting your course.
So currently is Maine the only jurisdiction in the United States that has any statutes on what we're talking about? The only jurisdiction that is price capping?
So a couple things on that. I believe the only two other states that have broad price caps are Kentucky and Rhode Island. And one thing I would note on Maine as well is that there was a recent article in the Portland Press Herald where they were talking about this bill, and they reached out to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office was unsure that this even was a price cap, the way it was drafted. And I don't, and so the enforcement of it, and if it's real, I think I'm basing off that article. So so I would just note that it's even a little gray area in Maine, whether it is based on the AG. I'll also note that the author of the bill filed emergency legislation to try to fix the bill in this session. That was voted down. I think leadership wants to kind of look at what the bill did. I think it moved quickly. There's clearly a need to revisit it, as noted by the emergency legislation. So I think it's Kentucky, Rhode Island. I'd have to look at others. And I think Maine is.
Kentucky and Rhode Island have had their price cap in place.
You have to look at that.
Just wondering what their experience.
And some of that, and this is a guess on my part, so full disclosure on disclosure, I've learned a lot, right? I know that's important as we've talked here. A lot of times, and we've seen a lot of states repeal it because these were in place when that, what I'll call street scalping, was prominent, and try to curtail that. And when it moved to a regulated, safe market, a lot of states repealed it. And I just wonder if Rhode Island and Kentucky haven't, and I don't know if it's being enforced or not. I'd have to look into it. Like Massachusetts is a perfect example. I think it was a 100-year bill that they repealed in 2024, right? So there are some of these that in every state, there are kind of bills that have, remain on the books. I'd have to look if that's the case in Kentucky and Rhode Island.
Individuals that are purchasing on StubHub, is there a requirement that they're signing that? I mean, apparently you don't allow anybody to sell their ticket for whatever amount. So and you can sell as many tickets as you want, as many tickets as you have.
As you have, right.
So if you purchase tickets by bots and.
So I should note that you legally purchased, right? So
okay, that's what I'm getting at. So when you sign up, are you signing something that says you're doing this legally and you indemnify StubHub in case if you purchase these tickets that you're trying to sell illegally?
Is like an attestation or something along those lines? I'm trying to think of the last time I believe there is. I don't want to be, I want to make sure, I believe there is. I hate saying things until I see them and confirm, but I believe so. Let me circle back with you on that. So for example, there's ambiguity in Maine. And again, we're not the reseller, right? The individual is. So in Maine, there is a line when you sell that says Maine, you're attesting that you're following Maine, like we have something specific in Maine for Maine law. So I know that exists. I can say that for certainty. I'd have to look at the other provisions off the top of my head.
So I would imagine if we pass something, you'd have any sellers in Vermont would have to follow the law, and you would make, in Rhode Island, you know, what's the experience in Rhode Island, Kentucky, all the jurisdictions, I would imagine the closer that all the jurisdictions can come to say a model law, easier it is for you and your users to comply with the law. Right?
We're not the only industry where a patchwork can be a challenge, right? As I'm sure you hear in this committee a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I just note, like for the Maine law and other laws, it applies to events taking place in that state. So that if someone from Maine purchases in Vermont, they would be subject to that. So the location of the event is the nexus. Right, because there's so much. I referenced that north of 50% of customers that buy for Vermont events are from out of state. It would hold true for them because even though they're out of state, because they're coming to a Vermont event. It would be different if you were a Vermonter going to a Red Sox game.
Then it falls under.
Or for folks northern part of the state that are going to Montreal as well. I know there's places there that are closer. Yes, true.
What challenges have you had in other jurisdictions when they're putting laws like this? And I guess, and how close are they to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, you know, when you look at the deceptive website, it's that broadness that we talked about. The other, you know, outside of the price cap, that's really the challenge that we're seeing here. I mean, I think what I'd say is the edges, right, that we want to work with you on. I think we can find broad agreement. Again, I've referenced other states that have done it. I think those are the models where, again, taking out price caps doesn't mean that you are not addressing the problems in ticketing. Let's address the websites that are where fraud is probably much more rampant than on StubHub. Let's address speculative tickets. Let's address bot activity. Let's make sure that fans, when they purchase, are guaranteed refunds. Right? Like there are things like that I think that are consumer focused, that are fan forward, that I think there's broad agreement on, and other states have shown that when they rolled up their sleeves and kind of dug into it. And that's why I think it's important when I came here to say, listen, we're not here to say, I'm sure there's a lot of people that come say, no, 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 no. We've actually seen other models in other states where rolling up our sleeves is a much better example. And if this committee and this legislature says, you know what, we've talked here a lot about disclosure. That's an area that we want to dig in a little bit more. Let's look at examples that work, and let's show you things that we've seen that are challenges, things that we've seen that work. And totally respect that you got to go back to your venues and others that's certainly important. What I just also note, the 6,000 users in Vermont of StubHub probably won't be testifying, but they're certainly impacted by this as well.
Yeah, I think disclosure is really important. I mean, people can buy whatever they want to buy for whatever price, as long as they understand what they're buying. And if they know what the fees are and what you're paying for. And, I think maybe some disclosure should be, this may not be the same face value ticket price. And
is that, not to be I shouldn't be the one asking questions. I totally get that. But would that be helpful to the committee to look back at other states and say, what have they done, not done on disclosure or other places that we think works or doesn't work, and provide that with you?
I think our lawyer has done.
Okay.
Looked at other jurisdictions.
Okay.
But it may be helpful to point out, some of the things that we're talking about of what other jurisdictions did.
Yeah. And again, I'd point to that Connecticut law. The Connecticut law passed, I think 2 days, you'll appreciate this, passed the House, I think 2 days before session. The Senate was poised to do it when sine die came and things closed, but it was unanimous in the House. I think that's going to come right back and get done. And that was, there were multiple ticketing bills. They looked at that hard. They, again, removed price caps. They tweaked the deceptive website language and got to a good place. I think that's probably a good, and it's, I think, regionally relevant to you. I think that's a good model, and we can certainly provide others that we think make a lot of sense. And again, Colorado would be a good example of that too. With respect to, I know you don't like the Colorado, sorry, I know you don't like the Colorado model, but.
Oh, no, just.
Yes, sorry, yes, yes. We're happy, we're happy to look at, Washington State or Oregon or other places that may make more sense.
I think, a couple of things that were brought up here, looking at your site, on a particular concert or whatever, it's only, 50 tickets left. I think you're able to make it plainer that it's only 50 tickets left on our site. Because that can be a little deceptive. You're thinking that there's no more tickets out there at all. I think that's important. And when you check out, is there a list of, here's what the ticket costs, here's what I'm selling my ticket for, here's what the tax was, here's what the fees are.
So the way it works is when you see the price on the front end, that's the total price you pay. And then when you go through the process of, click, 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 it shows you the total price. And there's an icon there that you hover over and it lists out the fees. The reason we do it that way, and interestingly enough, the FTC looked at this, and they looked at itemization, what we call itemization, listing it out. What they found was they didn't require it because sometimes more information is more confusing for consumers. So they just said, just list the total price. That's what they care about. We add that icon so you can kind of see.
I think it's important for people to know what extras what being charged for, what other fees there are involved within that.
No, it's interesting because in 2014, we tried all-in pricing and putting it up front because we thought that's what consumers wanted. And what we saw was we had a hit because other companies were not doing it, right? And so fans were they saw a $70 ticket, they saw ours at 80, they went to the 70, they got charged 90 at the end, and they weren't going back to our site. So we actually had to stop doing all-in pricing because the consumer was confused. So we long advocated for having that across the board. I'll just note right now, that's an FTC rule. It's not statute. Taking that FTC rule, putting into state statutes, we think are a good thing to solidify that.
I think we're at noon for lunch. So thank you. Sorry we didn't get to you.
It's fine. I'm here on behalf of the entire industry, just as an FYI, so CPEAK and others as well. I think we will provide more information to the as would be helpful. StubHub is one slice of a very large industry.
Okay. So David, thank you for joining us today. We'll keep working. If you're available, we'll be working through Chris and invite you back again for comments.
I'm a New Englander. I'll come back to New England even on a cold February morning. I'm happy to do it.
Very good. And Brian, same thing. If you want to testify as we go down the road, then you're welcome to come in.
Sure.
And I hope I answered all your questions best I could. Happy to follow up, provide some additional details,
Yeah, I know you.
and get you specifics. So happy. I took some notes. They're probably not perfect. I'll work with our folks here and all of you to get you what you need.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoy lunch.
Back here at 1 o'clock to have a walk through